Hi, this is Khalil Guliwala. Welcome to another episode of the BIPOC Manager podcast, a weekly podcast helping minorities overcome prejudice at work and build the careers of their dreams. Today, I'm really excited to have as a guest with us Basil Malik. Basil is a CRM thought leader, formerly CRM practice leader at Blyco, previously at Software Selection Advisors, currently based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's currently the CRM practice director at Net at Work LLC. I had a chance to work with Basil at a previous job, and Basil unlocked for me the ability to kind of build in feedback and conversation. Like he changed my professional life, he changed my personal life. I'm really excited to have him here. Basil, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it still means the world to hear you say that, and it never gets old. Just standard conversation has profound impacts. Words matter; they really do.
Yeah, no, they do, Basil. I mean, I think this is real. Like for me, like I've been in my head for like a huge part of my life. And what's interesting was working with you, especially in sort of a sales role. The idea is that, you can't just kind of say something and then kind of just leave it kind of on the table. You've got to kind of pull out feedback from people. I want to jump in your basket. Can you tell me, can you break down this sort of this thing you have about feedback, about getting feedback from other people?
Yeah, I feel like the thing that really unlocked it for myself is that my mind goes 1,000 miles an hour on a good day. Like, and typically it can go faster, it can go a little bit slower. Sometimes it's how much caffeine I've had on a given day. But when it comes to truly having getting that feedback and extracting information out of people, one, I have to get over my own thoughts of living in my own head, and I can't assume that the people that I'm interacting with know exactly what it is that I'm thinking or the direction that I'm going. So when you put it in that framework or that topical perspective, you're then able to start having much more intentional, engaging conversations. So you start with something very simple. And from a sales perspective, it's funny that you call me that because I never really consider myself a salesperson. I consider myself a consultant, but more importantly, I'm a people person. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy asking questions, digging a little bit deeper, and truly figuring out what makes people tick. And in the world of CRM, what makes people tick is typically they have an immediate need or a reason why they're exploring CRM. Sometimes they don't fully understand why they have a need. So when you look at it from that perspective, they have pain, they're reacting. You stump your foot on something, you have pain in your toe. You don't ask why you have pain in your toe, you just know that you do. But when it's something a lot more abstract, like a business need, it is so much more challenging to get that out. And it's almost like that analogy or euphemism, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. You have to do that with people that have pain, that have a need, or they think they have a need. And your goal at the end of the day is to really help them qualify it themselves, help them understand their need, understand their pain, so that they then have a better understanding of what it is, and they have a better place at which they can approach it. So step one is I like starting a lot of the conversations from a broad perspective. Why CRM, why now? And they'll typically go on 15-minute rant. And then from that, I can start picking and choosing some of the key things that I'm hearing. And then I just validate. So I heard you say this. This is my understanding of it. Is this correct? Is it incorrect? So then that's the first step of the first bite of the elephant, as it were. So then you can really start breaking down piece by piece what it is that is associated with it. And there's typically links in the chain when you're going down the list too. So it's really easy to talk about one thing, talk about another, and then start bringing it home to where you establish this loop of validation. So it's not just feedback, but it's also validating your understanding of what you're hearing, making sure that they have as much opportunity to really give you more and more detail. And circling back, you asked point one, you get to point five. It's very important that by the time you get to point five, you go back to point one just to revisit it, because during that conversation, they could have uncovered or thought of something else that they wanted to mention, but didn't have a good point to interject into the conversation. So that was a bit of a explanation, but
Yeah.
it's kind of the starting process of really starting to have much more meaningful and in-depth conversations. You remove You remove some of the call it the anxiety from the equation by just being a person. You're not there to tell them that they've done something wrong. You're not there to tell them that, your way is the only way. It's really just to show up and have a conversation. It's people connecting with people. And when you remember that and you're able to focus on the people aspect of what it is that you're doing, especially in the world of CRM, you can start extracting more and more meaningful feedback one piece at a time.
Yeah. No, I think what I love about Basil, and I think that word to validate. I think when you said that word, it's like that's the exact word, and that makes sense. Basil will use that because that's what you're doing in conversations. That you said is, I think we're having a conversation. You end up kind of forgetting all those previous steps taken to get there. You said step 5, validate and go back to step 1 and say, hey, is this still hold true? Is this chain still as strong as it's meant to be?
Absolutely. And validation, if you don't validate, you're running the risk of assuming. And you know what happens when you assume?
Yeah. That's what you and me, but this is very, Basil, what I loved again was just not just because I imagine as well, the ability to ask for feedback and even to validate a point is something that I said I had never seen this done in person, but you have, in terms of like, would you say like has it so again you say you also are like, and I see you're so focused on people and relationships, you love what kind of make what kind of makes people tick. Is there something that when you're using it, let's say in a more personal situation, like does that process change or get modified in any way in terms of when you're with an individual?
I don't think so. At the end of the day, if you're having a conversation with a friend, a colleague, a potential customer, your spouse, your significant other, whoever it might be, at the end of the day, as long as you approach the conversation from the same side of the table, that's probably one of my favorite analogies. If you sit down to a business transaction and it feels like you're on opposite sides of the table and each side has its own agenda, there's immediate friction and people have their guards up. And the same thing kind of applies to personal as well. If you sit down and you're having a conversation from a personal perspective and they feel like it's an interview or you're on the other side of the table, it takes a lot to actually make any substantial progress in that conversation on any level. And it doesn't matter what the topic is. So step number 1 is just making sure that they feel like you are on the same side of the table. You're not there to judge, to criticize, to point out all the things that they've done wrong. You're not there to issue judgment. You're not there to shame them. You're legitimately there as a person. And when they feel that you're there as a person, you can actually start having those meaningful conversations. So step 1 is find the path to get on their side of the table. And once you're on that side of the table, you can quite literally workshop, discuss, analyze whatever it is that you need to do for that specific topic. And it doesn't matter if it's personal or professional, you are literally on the same side of the table, working towards a common goal of understanding, and you are literally their ally. And once they feel like you are their ally, you are on their side, the depth of the conversation, the breadth of the conversation, it really becomes very limitless. So I think step number 1 is making sure that you do that. And once you're on that same side of the table, you can take the conversation in any which direction that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love that visual imagery of sort of being on the same side of the table.
Yeah.
Because, you can sense that sense that I think it was Citizen Kane's his table getting longer and longer as time goes on with his wife, but the idea is to actually get on the same side and work with them. And I want to pick up point of that, Basil, when you talk about again this idea where getting on the same side as individuals, for minorities, there can be an element of like bias and prejudice. Can you talk a bit more maybe of sort of how you maybe other people have sort of built kind of gotten the same side of the table in the face of bias or prejudice?
Yeah. I think the first place that I typically start, and I know that you've seen my background before, some of the people that are going to look at this podcast, they're going to see the background, they're going to see elements of personality. And I think when it comes to bias and prejudice, people see brown skin, a certain complexion, they immediately have reservations for whatever their experiences are. I don't focus on that. I focus on being myself. I focus on bringing my whole self to every conversation. And what really does help that is what I have behind me. Like these are all elements of my personality. People take one look at Batman, they're like, hey, this guy likes nerdy things. They see other paintings that are in the background as well. And if I move my head enough, you can start seeing the different elements of my personality. The other thing that I leverage very heavily outside of just placement behind me to let people know that, hey, I'm human. I'm just like you, a little bit different past, is humor. Humor is probably one of my favorite things to use, and you have to use it very wisely. You use too much of it, people don't take you serious. So in a business setting, that creates a bit of a challenge once they think that you're not serious or you don't take the situation seriously. That's a different type of friction. It's no longer bias and prejudice friction that you're facing. It's a different type, and you don't want those to layer and compound. So the idea is to somewhat peel out those layers of friction as best as you can. Me personally, I found that my identity resonates with humor. I don't take myself too seriously. I joke with my wife that I'm just a big kid. You'll find me smiling and laughing more often than not, and I carry that into my professional life too. I'm the same person at work as I am at home. And when I have that kind of cohesion of identity, it allows me to show up. I can be humorous, I can be myself. And when people approach or they see my name and they're like, oh, great, here's this Irby guy that probably is from who knows where, it allows me to start breaking down walls very quickly. And it breaks through that. And it is also on me if I feel like I am facing prejudice or bias or anything like that. Number one, I have to forgive them. Like they're either ignorant, they haven't experienced, whatever it is, I'm not going to judge them for where they are today. My focus is to be me and not let their bias or prejudice have me be any different than myself. So I'll still show up. I'm going to forgive them if I feel like there's any type of bias or prejudice. I'm going to focus on being myself. I'm going to interject elements of humor. I'm going to approach the conversation as just another human being.
Yeah. No, that's incredible, Beth. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're right. Like the pains behind you it's such a huge part of who you are. Like the humor and just that just finding joy
Mm-hmm.
in everyday life. And one thing I want to point out, and it's funny because it made me think about you pointing the paintings, but on another episode, when the guest was talking about how like for a lot of minorities, they is an emphasis on kind of showing off the educational skills.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that for a lot of minorities, they'll put actually all the university degrees and diplomas like, all behind them as signaling, and that they've gone to this place and have done it. And she was just an awareness of saying like, hey, minorities are why are you seeing this more for minorities versus non-minorities? Because minorities have, as part of the system, have kind of this feel like you almost like prove that you're the reason that you're there, and you do it through having diplomas and certificates behind you. But I find your approach so much more fun because it shows the personal element. It's more than you're just a diploma certificate, but someone who you said is nerdy, is geeky, who loves Batman and Van Gogh. I mean, that's a really beautiful mix over there.
Yeah, and it's an unintentional icebreaker. When I first got into this little, what I'm assuming is probably some sort of diagnosable condition by now, because I've got 9 of these paintings behind me that you can't see all of them. But it started with the Batman painting, and Facebook ads got me. People ask all the time, did you paint all those? The answer is absolutely not. I just got a really strong impulse buying reflex. And I went from seeing the ad on Facebook ads to buying it within 5 minutes. But when it arrived, I had it placed in the background because I was procrastinating. I didn't hang it up immediately, but I had the intention, well-meaning intention of hanging it. One meeting starts. Brand new customer, never met them a day in my life. I've very relatively new into that role at that particular job, at practice leader at Blytheco. And as we're waiting for everyone to join, this individual is like, he's moving around and like he can actually gonna adjust his view, like my camera somehow. He's like, is that Batman? I'm like, yeah. So then I go back and I hold it up. I'm like, yeah, it's Van Gogh Batman. He's like, it's so cool. Opened up the conversation. It completely disarmed everyone that was on there. And that was my shortcut to going to their side of the table. So then it was much more friendly, much more personable. And then it happened again. Later that same day, I had another conversation with people I'd never met before. And someone else pointed it out. Like, really? So I don't even have to try. I'm interjecting elements of my personality. that was an accident. They like it, they resonate with it, they ask questions about it, they get excited about it. That then allows us to start exploring other topics. So, it's funny that you mentioned that a lot of people will have degrees and other types of like validation. That's all well and good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it makes me smile because I don't have any element of professionalism whatsoever in my background. And I can tell you that there have been zero people that ask me about my education, my degree, how I carry myself. It projects the level of experience and expertise that I need to effectively be what I need for the people that I'm interacting with at that given point in time. And the fact that I'm able to make it more of a personal relationship and less of a personal or more personal, less professional, that allows me to have much more engaging conversations, kind of going back to what we talked about already.
Yeah. Thanks, Basil.
Mhm.
Before we wrap up, Basil, is any points that you want to mention? Anything you'd like to bring up?
I, I think if I was going to boil it down to some of the things that I found resonate and work well for me, step number one is know who you are. Know who you are and how you want to be in the respective environments that you're going to engage in. Me, I don't want to be two different people. I want to be one person. So my identity is me. When I'm in this office, I'm myself. When I walk out my office door, I'm myself. When I go outside of this door, I'm myself. I'm never anyone else. Uh, the other aspect is just know that when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with people. They're flawed. They have their experience, their history. If you think about where you've been in your life, you've seen and done some stuff, and it's what makes you uniquely you. And the same thing goes for the people that you're engaging with. They are their own people. They have their own history and experience. Um, it's not to be used against them. Everyone has a past, everyone has a history. They show up in every conversation with who they are at that given point in time. And that point in time person that you're dealing with is going to change, but who they are in that engagement, just recognize that they're a person. And it doesn't matter if they're coming at you with bias or prejudice or anything along those lines. They're people. And once you accept them for being people, that they're inherently going to be flawed, it kind of reduces the, I don't know, maybe the expectations that you have of them by default, so that you're able to engage with them on a different level. And once you can get down to that more personal level, it enriches the conversation tremendously. And from a CRM perspective, when we're talking about software and you're talking about software that's supposed to help establish behaviors for people to fall into so that management gets what they need, but more importantly, the end users have exactly what they need to do their job more effectively. I mean, you're quite literally dealing with all those aspects of people and not software. So I would say if I was going to tie everything into a nice little bow, identity is key. Make sure that you know who you are as a person and as a professional, and hopefully it's the same individual. And then when you're dealing with people, just recognize that you're dealing with people. They're flawed, but at the end of the day, most people are good people.
Yeah. No, I think so. When I talk to you, I think it's the notion that you be working in CRM, you understand data and analytics and technology, but I think you understand people so well, and that's what makes
Mhm.
you so good at what you do.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I've no matter what profession I've really been in, and it's funny that you mention it like that. I was a personal trainer at one point in time,
Okay.
and personal training, if you break it down, it has maybe 10% to do with the training aspect, and it's 90% about personal. The same thing can be said about CRM as well. It's maybe 10% about CRM and it's 90% about people. So when you look at it from those ratios and that level of understanding, if you're good with people, you can be good with pretty much anything. And I just happen to use my goodness with people to make me successful within the CRM space. And it allows me to connect with them on a different level, extract more information, which I can then use to benefit them. I don't try and extract information with any other intention than good intentions and trying to make a better situation for them.
Yeah. And people talk about win-win, but with you, Basil, I've always felt it. Like no matter
Oh
who's
yeah.
on the table, everybody's like, let's all get out of this better than when we enter the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say it that way too, because not every conversation that you have is going to end in a way that you're like, all right, we've clearly explored the options that we've talked about, and it makes sense for us to do business together. That's not always the outcome. Sometimes the conversation that I have with people interested in CRM here lately, for the last 11 years, it's been more about we're either going to do something with CRM or we're not. And it almost becomes a therapy session in some of these discovery or introduction calls, because again, we're exploring pain, we're exploring things that they really can't, put their finger on. But conversations are either going to go really well where you get a positive outcome that you like, or things are going to go really well where the outcome is still positive, but you're not necessarily going to sell them something. And you're removing that expectation of closing a deal or anything like that. It also kind of allows you to engage with them more as people and as individuals. And from that point, if you follow up with them, you're able to follow up on more than just, hey, are you interested in buying my stuff? It's more of, hey, how are you? How's it going? Since we last talked, this is what we talked about. And it makes the follow-up a lot more seamless too. Less salesy, and again, more about people.
So in case anyone wants to reach out to you or stay in touch, what's the best way for people to do that?
I would say LinkedIn is a wonderful place to start. I'm not as active on the outside from LinkedIn, but I typically troll my feed quite often. So if people reach out to me on LinkedIn, best way to getting a hold of me.
Okay. Thank you so much for being a guest today, Basil.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.